They called me a burden, so I sold everything they took for granted, emotional, vengeful, and mysterious. They called me useless, a burden, just an extra mouth to feed. And as they laughed behind my back, I quietly signed the papers that would change everything. My name is Evelyn Parker, and I'm 67 years old. I've lived my entire life in the quiet, rolling hills of Carroll County, Iowa, where our family farm has stood strong for nearly a century. My daddy used to say that soil had memory, that if you listened close enough, it would whisper the stories of every back bent to work it. Well, if that's true, then our land has heard some of my deepest heartbreaks. I wasn't always alone. I had 3 siblings, Tom, Susan, and David. We all grew up together in that big white farmhouse with the green shutters, just off Route 30. Summers were for hauling hay, and winters were for sitting around the fireplace, watching snow fall like secrets from heaven. Back then, I thought we'd always be close. But time has a way of turning hearts cold. After our parents passed, Mum from a stroke in 2005, and Dad just 2 years later, the farm became a question mark. Who would keep it running? Who would live there? Who would inherit what? That's when the cracks started to show. That's when my siblings began whispering things they thought I'd never hear. "She never married," Susan once muttered, thinking I was out of earshot. "She doesn't have kids. She doesn't even work," Tom added, shrugging like I was invisible. "She's just another mouth to feed," David said. That one stuck. They saw me as dead weight, a relic of the past, clinging to memories and empty barns. But they didn't understand. I stayed because this land was my soul. I cared for it after Mum and Dad died. I kept the books, paid the taxes, fixed the roof when hailstorms rolled in. I grew tomatoes out back, sold eggs to the local diner, and donated surplus to the food bank every fall. I wasn't just living, I was surviving. Alone, yes, but surviving with purpose. And yet, to them, I was in the way. In 2019, I overheard the final straw. I had come downstairs early one morning to find them huddled around the dining table, Tom, Susan, and David. They hadn't seen me yet. "She's not contributing," Susan said, tapping her perfectly polished nails on the oak table. "We could lease the East Field to the Hendersons if she moved out." "We could even sell," David added. "Split the profits 3 ways." 3 ways. My heart sank like a stone. They were planning to push me out. And the worst part? They didn't even think I deserved a share. That's when I realized I wasn't part of their plan. Not now, not ever. I walked back upstairs that day without saying a word. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared out the window at the soybean fields glistening in the morning dew. My father once said, "Family is who shows up when it's inconvenient." I finally understood what he meant. That night, I took out the old cedar box from under my bed. Inside were the original deed papers to the farm, signed by Grandpa Harold in 1927, and a folder my father had tucked away just before he passed. It was the updated last will and testament, signed, notarized, and legally binding. And do you know what it said? That the entire farm, every acre, every outbuilding, every windmill and rusted tractor, had been left to me. Just me. They didn't know. And I hadn't told them. Because I thought maybe they'd still treat me like a sister, not a shareholder. But I was wrong. As I held that will in my hands, shaking, I made a decision. One that would turn the tables in a way they'd never expect. They called me an extra mouth. I'd show them what that mouth could do. The next morning, I called a lawyer. And what followed? Well, they never saw it coming. The phone call was short and calm. Mr. Wallace, my father's old estate attorney from Des Moines, still remembered me. "Evelyn?" he said, his voice warm like flannel on a winter day. "Your father said you might call me one day. He left instructions, private ones." That stopped me cold. My father left instructions? For me? I made the 2-hour drive to his office in silence, the farm fields whizzing past like ghosts. When I walked in, Mr. Wallace was already waiting. He poured me a cup of coffee, just the way Dad liked it, black, with a splash of milk. He opened a folder, thick with papers, and laid it between us. "Your father wanted to protect you," he said. "He knew how your siblings were. He knew how much you'd sacrificed for this land." I blinked back tears. I hadn't even told him why I was there, but somehow he knew. We went over everything: the updated will, land deeds, the trust account, and, most importantly, the ownership clause my father had inserted quietly after Mom passed. It clearly stated that if any disputes arose, I had the sole decision-making power over the farm. No need for unanimous family consent, no votes, no approval needed. I owned it, and I could sell it, or lease it, or bulldoze it for that matter. I left his office that day with a folder that weighed more than bricks. Not in my hands, but in my heart. Because now I had the power, the leverage. But I also had the ache of knowing it had come to this. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But sometimes, peace doesn't come until you stop being a doormat. That weekend, my siblings came to the farm again, uninvited, as usual. Susan walked in like she owned the place, wearing a bright coral blazer and heels totally unsuited for the muddy driveway. Tom and David followed, acting like they were here on business. "Evelyn," Susan said, crossing her arms, "we've been thinking. It's time to sell the Eastfield. We already have a buyer lined up. The Hendersons are offering a solid price." I stared at her, expressionless. "We just need you to sign," David added, sliding a typed-up agreement across the kitchen table like a car salesman. Tom chimed in. "It's a good deal, Evie. Don't make this difficult." That was when I placed the folder gently on the table. They all looked confused. Then I opened it. I handed each of them a copy of Dad's will and the legal documents Mr. Wallace had prepared. Tom frowned. What is this?" "It's the truth," I said. "Dad left everything to me. The house, the fields, the livestock, the decisions, it's all mine." Silence. You could hear the tick of the old wall clock like a countdown. Susan's face went pale. David's jaw clenched. Tom looked like someone had just slapped him across the face. "You're lying," Susan finally spat. "Dad would never do that." "He did," I said calmly. "And you know what? I wish he hadn't had to. I wish we were the kind of family who could have talked this out. But I've seen who you are when you think I'm powerless." David stood up abruptly. "So what now? You're just going to lord it over us? Hold it all hostage?" "No," I said, rising too. "I'm going to make some decisions, and you won't like them." That night, I stood on the porch, looking out at the land I'd loved and protected my entire life. But now, I didn't feel protected. I felt awakened. Because when you finally realize your worth, you don't sit at tables where love is conditional. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat in the rocker, and began to think. Not about what they'd done to me, but about what I was about to do next. The offer came in fast, and when I told my siblings, they begged. Oh, they begged. It didn't take long. Just one phone call to a local real estate agent, Marcy Hill, a no-nonsense woman from Council Bluffs who'd handled more farm transitions than most folks had births in their families. She came out that week, walked the property, took notes, snapped photos, and gave me a long look when she stepped off the porch. "You're sitting on something big here, Evelyn," she said. "Old family farms with full water rights and this much acreage. You could get $500,000 without blinking." I blinked. "Or," she added, "if you're willing to be patient, maybe even more. Developers are sniffing out this area. All they see is future subdivisions and easy money." I didn't say much, just nodded and stared out toward the west field, the one Daddy always called the stubborn acre. Funny, he could have been talking about me. We listed the property that Thursday, quietly. No sign out front, no newspaper notice, just a few private calls, a listing buried deep online. And within 5 days, we had 3 serious offers. One from a couple looking to turn it into an organic co-op, another from a corporate agricultural investor. But the third, that one made my heart stop. A development firm out of Omaha wanted to buy the entire farm for $850,000, cash. They didn't want the house, or the barn, or the fences, or the tractors. Just the land. The contract was clean. No contingencies. And they were willing to let me stay on the property through the winter, rent-free, so I could close the chapter comfortably. I signed the intent to sell that afternoon. The next morning, I invited my siblings to dinner. I baked chicken, just like Mom used to. Mashed potatoes, green beans, sweet tea. I even set the table with the blue china we only used on holidays. They came, reluctantly, confused, suspicious. Tom was the first to speak once we'd all sat down. "What is this?" he asked, side-eyeing the fine silverware. "A guilt dinner?" "No," I said. "It's a goodbye dinner." Forks paused in mid-air. I let the silence stretch just enough to make them squirm, then said, "I sold the farm." David's glass clinked against his plate. Susan blinked like I'd slapped her. "You... what?" she whispered. I calmly handed them each a copy of the pending sale agreement. Cash buyer. Closing in 30 days. "You can't do this," Tom said, rising from his chair, his voice shaking. "I can," I said. And I did. "This is our legacy," Susan yelled. "You don't get to destroy that because you're bitter." "Oh," I said softly. "So now it's our legacy? When you called me useless? When you said I didn't matter?" David leaned forward. "We didn't mean—" "You did," I snapped. "Every word. You saw me as dead weight, as an obstacle. So now I'm removing myself." They all began talking at once. Begging, bargaining, threatening lawsuits. Tom even pulled out his phone, frantically searching legal loopholes, mumbling about undue influence and implied family ownership. But it was too late. Everything was in my name, and my attorney had made sure every document was airtight. "I'm not keeping the money," I said, standing up. That shut them up again. "I'm donating most of it to a foundation in Mom and Dad's name. For single women in agriculture. Women who never got credit for working the land." Susan stared at me, mouth open. David looked like he'd been punched. Tom just sat down, stunned. "This place made me who I am," I said. "But staying here, letting you treat me like I didn't exist, that almost broke me." I looked at each of them in the eyes. I'm done being quiet. That night, as I washed the dishes by hand one last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd reclaimed my voice. And for once, they had no choice but to listen. But peace doesn't come without backlash. What they did next, I never saw coming. I should have known they wouldn't take it quietly. For a moment, after that dinner, I felt like I'd finally closed the book. like I could move forward with dignity, knowing I'd taken control of my story. But the thing about family wounds is they don't scab over clean, they fester. And my siblings weren't done. It started with the calls, dozens of them, sometimes one right after the other. I stopped answering after the second day. I changed my voicemail to something simple. Please respect my boundaries. This decision is final. That didn't stop them. Susan left long, rambling voicemails about healing the family and how I'd embarrassed them in the community. David's messages were cold and short, legal threats cloaked in brotherly concern. But it was Tom's messages that cut deepest. He just kept saying the same thing. You ruined us, Evie. But the real storm came about a week before closing. I came home from picking up some canned goods in Denison, and as I turned into the gravel driveway, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Spray painted in red on the old barn doors were the words, Traitor. You'll regret this. Family first. I sat in my truck, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just froze. The land was quiet. Too quiet. Like it was holding its breath. I called the sheriff. A kind young man named Deputy Halverson showed up within the hour. He took pictures, shook his head, and said gently, Do you have any idea who might have done this, Ma'am? I laughed bitterly. I have 3 very loud guesses. He offered to file a report, but I declined to press charges. I didn't want this to turn into a war, but inside, I felt something shift, something harden. They didn't just disagree with my decision, they wanted to punish me for it. Later that week, I received a letter, a formal one, typed and signed by David's attorney. It claimed that my siblings were entitled to a share of the proceeds due to implied contribution and historical inheritance rights. It accused me of acting in bad faith. It demanded mediation. I took the letter to Mr. Wallace in Des Moines. He read it slowly, then looked at me over his glasses and said, This is grasping. They're flailing. But could they win? I asked. No, he said firmly. But they'll make noise. They'll drag it out if you let them. That's when I made my second decision. I wasn't just going to sell the land. I was going to leave everything behind. The farmhouse, the furniture, the family photographs in the hallway, all of it. I didn't need to take the pieces with me anymore. I had already carried the weight long enough. I wrote them each a letter, not to explain and not to justify, just the truth. To Susan, I wrote, You always believed love had to be earned. I hope one day you see it can also be given freely. To David, power isn't in control. It's in compassion. Try leading with that next time. To Tom, you weren't ruined by me. You were ruined by your own silence when it mattered most. I left the letters on the kitchen table, neatly folded under 3 chipped coffee mugs, one for each of them. Then I packed a single suitcase, 2 changes of clothes, a framed photo of Mom and Dad in their wedding attire, and 1 packet of heirloom tomato seeds I'd saved from last year's garden. I locked the front door, slid the key into the mailbox, and drove away. The windmill in the distance turned slowly, creaking like an old friend waving goodbye. For 67 years, I had been the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who stayed behind while everyone else lived their lives, but not anymore. I wasn't running away from the past. I was walking towards something new. I thought I'd left the worst behind. But then, 3 months later, a letter arrived that stopped my heart. I settled in Decorah, a quiet town in northeastern Iowa where the hills roll like soft shoulders and the air smells of pine and promise. I rented a modest 1-bedroom cottage on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but the front porch caught the sunrise, and the backyard had space for a little garden. It was peaceful. Nobody knew my name. Nobody looked at me like I owed them anything. I volunteered at the community library 3 days a week. On Thursdays, I'd walk to the farmer's market and buy bread from a woman named Cora, who always gave me an extra slice of banana loaf just because. Slowly, I stitched together a new kind of life. Quiet, gentle, mine. Then the letter came. It was a plain white envelope, no return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. Susan. My hands trembled as I opened it. I half expected venom, more legal threats, some final grasp at control. But inside was something else entirely. Evelyn, we were wrong. All of us. I know you probably won't believe that. And maybe you never want to hear from me again. I understand. But I need to tell you something. After you left, Tom fell apart. He drank. David shut down. They both blamed you, but I saw it for what it was. We destroyed the one person who held us together. I didn't realize how much you carried until the house sat empty. Until I tried to make your old cornbread recipe and failed. Until I opened Dad's ledger and saw how many times he'd written, "Evelyn handled this." I miss you, not because of what you gave us, but because of who you are. If you're willing, I'd like to visit. Just once. Just to say it to your face. Love, Susan. I sat on the porch for a long time after reading it. The breeze stirred the wind chimes gently. A robin landed on the railing. I stared at the horizon and wondered, was this real? Did she mean it? Or was it just another version of manipulation wrapped in guilt? That night, I didn't sleep much. Memories kept floating up. Susan braiding my hair when I was little, her singing Patsy Cline while doing the dishes. The time she drove 3 hours to pick me up from college after I'd broken up with my first love. We hadn't always been like this. The resentment, the bitterness. It had crept in over years, like dust gathering in corners no one bothers to sweep. But could I forgive? Could I trust? The next morning, I wrote back. Just a few lines. Susan, I'm not sure what to say. I didn't expect this, but I appreciate it. I really do. I'm not ready for a visit yet, but I'm open to writing. Maybe that's where we start. Take care, Evelyn. I walked to the post office and dropped it into the big blue box. And for the first time in years, I felt something strange blooming in my chest. Not hope exactly, something softer, possibility. Weeks passed, and letters came, slow, steady, full of memories and pain and truth. Susan told me about the night David finally admitted he resented Dad for favoring me, how Tom confessed to feeling invisible his whole life, like the middle child no one asked much from, but expected everything of. She told me about Mum's old journals, which she'd found in the attic, about the page where Mum wrote, "Evelyn is the glue. I worry that when she's gone, they'll fall apart." I cried when I read that. Not because it hurt, but because I finally felt seen, even by a mother who'd been gone for decades. One morning in late spring, I planted the heirloom tomato seeds in my backyard. As I pushed the soil over them, I whispered, "Grow strong. Take your time." Maybe I wasn't just talking to the seeds. Maybe I was talking to all of us. I thought the story was over. But what happened on the 1-year anniversary of the sale changed everything. 1 year to the day. That's how long it had been since I handed over the keys to the farm, folded up the life I knew, and stepped into the unknown. I hadn't spoken to Tom or David since that dinner. Susan and I had kept writing, letters every few weeks, filled with cautious warmth and the quiet work of rebuilding trust. We didn't talk about the past much anymore, not because we'd forgotten, but because we'd already bled it dry. That morning, I woke early, just like me. I was about to head inside when I heard the tires on gravel. A car pulled up. Not Susan's. Not anyone I recognized. A man stepped out, mid-30s, jeans, button-down shirt, kind eyes. He held a folder in his hands and walked toward me with the hesitancy of someone unsure whether they were welcome. "Mrs. Hart?" he asked. "Yes," I said slowly, standing. "I'm Caleb Jensen. My company purchased your family's property last year." I blinked. "You work for the development group?" "I did," he said, then smiled gently. "But I left a few months ago. Started something new. Actually, that's what I'm here about." He opened the folder and handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a photograph. The farmhouse, restored. Painted white with soft blue shutters. The barn stood tall, refurbished with new siding and its roof intact. But the land was untouched. No subdivisions, no bulldozers, no concrete scars, just golden fields, wildflowers, fences mended with care. "What is this?" I asked, heart pounding. He nodded. "After we bought the land, my father, he passed not long after, left me a letter. He was from this town. Turns out he grew up admiring your family. He always said, 'That Hart farm taught me what hard work looks like.' When he heard the place was for sale, he made the purchase under the development firm's name. But his plan was never to build houses." I sat down, stunned. "He left it to me, and I decided to turn it into something better, something honest." He pulled out another photo, a hand-painted sign. "Hart Foundation for Women in Agriculture, established 2024. My throat tightened. Caleb continued. "We've turned the farm into a training center for women like you. Women who gave their lives to land and labor and never got credit. We host workshops, offer scholarships, even provide free housing during the growing season." Tears welled in my eyes. "I used the last of the donation you made in your parents' name," he said softly, "to build a greenhouse in your honor. It's called Evie's Roots." I covered my mouth. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Everything I had fought for, every sacrifice, every insult, every lonely night, it had bloomed into something bigger than me, something that would last. Later that day, I called Susan. "I just had a visitor," I said. She laughed. So did I. "What?" "Tom and David," she whispered. "They showed up. Said they're tired of pretending they weren't wrong, that they missed you, that they want to visit." I didn't speak, just listened to the soft hum of something healing across the phone line. A week later, I stood at the edge of the old field. Tom beside me, eyes red, but no longer angry. David a few feet behind, quietly placing a single rock on the fence post the way Dad used to when he finished a day's work. Susan held my hand. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes, legacy isn't about what you build. It's about what you're brave enough to leave behind.